recording.
Yeah, not off.
So who wants to do the Hello Steelers?
Yeah.
Hello, Steelers!
No, you got to say it right. It's Alan Fluff Freeman. Greetings, Steel Pickers. That's what you got to say.
Willkommen.
So hello again, Steelers. This is part 2 of the trip to Lard Island video.
Not off.
Not half, and I'm here with these two idiots again. We just played a second game of Chain of Command, haven't we? This time this is Far East. This is the forthcoming Far East handbook, as you can see. Far East. We've got
Buddha joined us.
How much more Far Eastern can you get?
So what's the summing up on that? Well, let's talk about it, Nick, as a game, and then Richard can tell us basically what we did wrong or what we did right.
Well,
first of all, you were the Japanese, weren't you, Nick?
I was playing the Japanese commander, so I had the enviable task of blocking your passage, which was actually gave a really interesting game because you pushed on with some determination and stretched our defences, although. I think we gave you a storm of steel.
You certainly did. You certainly did. Yeah, dropping as many names as you can.
It's all done with mirrors, folks.
It is. It is definitely smoke and mirrors. Yeah. From my point of view, pushing up this road was almost impossible. It felt it anyway, because all my jumping off points felt like they were right down the bottom end, and we were going up the long end of the table. And it felt like every time I destroyed a Japanese unit, or felt like I destroyed a Japanese unit, something else bloody came and took its place anyway.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm going to take some of the credit for that because I purposely set my mind in the patrol phase to just lock you down as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Because that would then minimise your jump off points and keep them further away from me. So I'm going to take full credit for that.
I think you should.
But it's an important point actually because at this phase of the war, we're 1945 in Burma, where basically Mandalay has fallen and the Indian Army are driving south to try and take Rangoon before the monsoons, and the Indian Army at this point are really tip-top forces. The troop quality is much better than the ragtag remains of the Japanese who fought at Imphal and Kohima and are literally in bits. The supply line has completely collapsed. Everything's going wrong, and consequently the Indian force here had the advantage of a rather enhanced patrol phase, which allows them to get much more width on the table. But in focusing on the width, the Japanese did the right thing and they rushed forward to try and shut you down in terms of where you were going. And it did mean that you had broad deployment options. I mean, you had a jump-off point on this flank, you had a jump-off point right on the far flank, you had a jump-off point nearer the middle. And in fact, you had 4 jump-off points, again, because of your superior quality. But the Japanese were very focused in the centre.
Yeah, definitely.
What that gives you, though, as a defender, is it enables you to watch your attacker coming on.
Yes.
Which means that, you
You're
feel
just
more
waiting
in
to see
control.
where the spear point's coming out, don't you?
Yeah.
And it felt like
actually,
I didn't really know where best to attack.
Well, you pushed everywhere. So if you're infantry platoon, you've got a section right over here, you've got a section right over there, and you've got a section coming up the middle, and that means at no point are you getting overwhelming force. And also, your Vickers deployed early. And did a good job shooting up the the Japanese forces in the Rangoon exports industrial unit. But it was the tank. You didn't need the Vickers. It was the tank that did that. Had you kept the Vickers up your sleeve and deployed that somewhere else where you wanted to get local fire superiority, that could have done you a lot more favours. But I think the answer is the Indian Army at this point in time are very at home in this dense, close terrain, and you're not. So it's a learning game because as somebody who's used to playing in the open countryside of northwestern Europe, once you move into the Far East, it's a very different environment.
This is the thing. It feels. I mean, this is the second Far East game I've played of the new Chain of Command versions of it, and it feels really enclosed and really it feels tight. And I mean, it's warm in here now, so it feels like we're in a dense, horrible, hot jungle. But and like you said, Richard, before we start recording, is that it feels the psychology of it changes, I think, as well as the game. Just the fact that everything feels closer, and you don't want to go in the jungle because you don't know how far you're going to be moving. And in our first game of it, as the US Marines, we just couldn't get forward, and I think that's kind of scarred me a little bit. thinking about it in the future for playing. But
you were really under the cosh with a Japanese sniper there, weren't you?
Yeah.
And again,
and there was one here, but he didn't really do a great deal of damage, did he? But lots of shock.
Yeah.
Well, again, with those, where he was effective was where he was operating at a distance, where you were coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
He was wounding and taking off leaders.
Yeah, well, you knocked leaders out and you didn't kill them, but you knocked them out. And again, that was bad things happen for me. So it's soon not my force morale right down.
Yeah.
How would you, you put this on at shows and things, haven't you, Richard? Anyway, I mean, what's the key to unlocking this as an Indian player, for example?
I think the key to unlocking this is to get fire superiority at one point. Don't try and cover the whole table. Find out where your opponent is the weakest and try and go somewhere else. I think one of the advantages that the Japanese have got here is, you've got bunkers. So if I were you, I would be sending forward scouting groups to try and identify where the enemy is first before deciding where to commit my forces. You've got a great advantage operating in the jungle, that your troops are superbly trained, and in fact the problem they had when they came out onto the more open plains of Burma is they had to rethink it. But you've got the advantage here, there's quite a lot of jungle and plantations here, so your guys really know what they're doing in that. They can move in that with confidence. They're not going to be suffering from things like heat exhaustion because they're very, very fit and acclimatised. So probing forward with scouts and then bringing forward your jump off points, or at least building up a chain of command dice would allow you then to decide, right, where is my opponent the weakest, and that's where I'm going to decide where I'm going to go. A lot of people, when they play chain of command, think that the deployment mechanism onto the table is designed to frustrate them. It's not. It's encouraging you to not put your troops onto the table until you know where you want to deploy them to get overwhelming force. A lot of people say to me, oh yeah, but you should have 3-to-1 in order to get victory. You should have 3-to-1, and it's down to you to find the point on the table where you can put that 3-to-1 together. So if you can send forward scouts to get your enemy to deploy. So Nick's got a very nice defensive position here with a Japanese squad in prepared positions, and a machine gun in a bunker and some spider holes protecting that. But once he's down in that, he ain't moving. He's tied down to that position. So if you've scouted that out and then just don't go there, he's got a great defensive position that you're not interested in. And that's a third of his rifle sections already tied up.
And what was completely my fault as well is I forgot there was a mortar battery as well,
which
would have completely blocked this end off anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, you had big issues with the Japanese defenders in this position here, and you had a senior Japanese leader there, Kendo Nagasaki, who was calling in the knee mortar fire. And had you saturated that area with mortar fire, that would have stopped him being able to see you over here, and then you could have repositioned those troops, moved them round. Not remembering your key support asset is never a good plan.
I put a piece of paper down and didn't look at it again since.
But the other thing when you're playing this type of terrain is that it looks like a built-up position, but of course the buildings are not. Hard cover.
No.
They're all right cover anyway.
A couple of them are actually. This is more European design shops. This is a British company there, but all the others, they're really made out of matchwood. You put a round of HE into this, and the building very rapidly became unstable. And you did have a unit of Indian National Army, what the British called the GIFs, the Japanese Indian Forces, who decided that they'd had enough and they were going to abandon that position and put their hands up. So
they came over to my side, didn't they?
Well, they didn't. Yeah, that's right.
Went to the back,
they're probably digging airfields just up the road to get support.
But that was the area where you inflicted highest casualties on the Japanese.
It is.
Where you did have that local fire superiority. You had, I think, at least two sections plus the tank putting fire into that position. And I think you certainly took out one whole section pretty much. And then the other guys that change sides at the end of the turn, basically.
Yeah,
We decided that enough was enough. We're not going to fight against you. And that left me with a hole, really. I was worried about that.
Yeah, you said that. I mean, you know, from my point of view, it just felt like I was grinding forward, and it felt like you were in a comfortable position. But obviously, you said differently, and you felt. How did you feel about it? You know.
Well, I know they're potentially good troops. They put in lots of fire. All the while you've got armour support. You've got the ability to move up. Because the downside for me from having a good patrol phase was that, of course, because it ended really quickly, it didn't give me many good jump-off points either.
That's
so
true.
Kind of a double-edged sword in that.
Yeah.
So it really meant actually I was only mainly on this side of the road, for instance.
Yeah.
And then had to move up to other areas. So yeah, it did. I did feel worried, and the tank is always a worry. While it's like, if your dragon is alive, I'm scared of it. But luckily, we were able to deal with it eventually.
What was it? You ended up with what? Three chain of command dice.
I took 3 chain of command dice, which I used each
all
turn,
my turns.
each phase to interrupt to keep fire the AT gun, and eventually
you didn't destroy it, but you bailed it, didn't you?
Just
and that is
volume
enough,
of
isn't
fire.
it? Yeah, that's enough to do it. And that, you know, felt realistic, really. You know, you're suddenly getting this fire just coming at me, and it's like, right, let's get out of here. Well, it was a great game as far as I'm concerned, even though I lost.
You didn't just lose, mate. You were stuffed sideways.
It certainly was. This is the line. That's the line I got to, isn't it? It's not even. It's what, a third of the table.
It's an embarrassment, frankly. I've never seen anybody perform so badly on this table.
But it is a learning curve, isn't it? And I think when you take players to the Far East, they're going to have to learn again.
Exactly.
Some of the stuff they take for granted.
You're playing the game as though you're in European theatre, and it's just totally different.
It's a very, very different environment. It's a very different environment. And again, the way they operate, you know, your Indian forces, they've got a lot of submachine guns. They've been trained to assault using the Bren, firing from the hip in part of the assault. So they really are pokey when they're going in. The Japanese are very brave, but they don't have a lot of automatic weapons. And they're also at this point in the war where they've been told, like, don't sell yourself on banzai charges because it's just the way we lose men. We've got to make every inch of the ground contested. So they're not. They're very brave, but they don't have the advantages that they do in the early war. They've lost a lot of men. The squads are smaller, but they still got stickability.
And that's what it's all about. Well, another great game of Chain of Command, and once again, thanks.
Not half.
Not half, indeed, Steelers. And thanks again for inviting me down. It's been great. This has been my adventure down at Lard Island, which apparently isn't an island.
Don't tell them that.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that out loud, should I?
Apparently, being the word, it might look like it isn't an island.
I was blindfolded when I was brought here, so I don't know if it is an island or not. But yeah, so once again, chaps, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next Storm of Steel video.